All right, and we're COMP100, and it's week 4, lesson 4, part 1. We should be actually lesson 3, or a little bit behind. And for today we're looking at chapter 2, using data from the book that's for this course. And before we get started, I want to go over the stuff that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to learn about variables, again, how do we declare them. We kind of did that last week in a very short way. I kind of got into about data last week, a little bit, but not much, right? The things we did a lot last week, if we review, is, and let's just create a project together. So follow me here. Let's do it together, almost like this little tutorial. My lessons, the way we do it is we intercut between like lecture and lab. Kind of do both at the same time. So that way you're hands-on all the time. I want you to be as hands-on as you can be, right? So that way it's not me just talking away, it's you doing. Because we learn by doing, right? We don't learn by talking, okay? So let's do this. So we're going to go into Visual Studio Ultimate 2013 here. And I'm going to click New Project. Follow me here if you can. And I'm going to click Visual C# on the top. Now there's several choices like we kind of saw last time. One of them is this console app, which is where we want to access right here, console application. Okay? I'm just going to bring this up so you can see a little better over my head, right? Now the default name for the project is a console application 2, which is not what we want. Okay, we want to rename it something that makes sense to us. And because we're, Comp 100 and it's lesson 4, then that's what we'll put in. So Comp 100 lesson 4. You can put in something that makes sense for you. Now you're going to have some choices here before you press OK. One of them is, hey, where is the location? What's the location of your project? I put mine in a local folder that I call GitHub, because I'm going to sync up my files just like I do every week with GitHub, so you can follow me live too, right? So if you want to look at the source code, things we're talking about, you want to follow along with the videos, you can do so by looking at the videos and following along on GitHub. Okay, so here they are. So C users, this is where my local repository is. You can put them wherever you want. Now you can, it's going to be whatever it is on your machine here. All right, now you can put them in documents. You can put them in on your, if you want, on your network drive, I believe. You can actually drop them in there as well because you have a student drive that you can put them on. You can put them on a thumb drive if you want to. Wherever you choose to put them is where they're going to save, and this is how you're going to work. So that's one thing. So the name of your project is here, and also the solution name is here. You can make these different if you want to, but for now, and for probably programming 1 and programming 2 for the most part, if you have me or someone else, they're probably going to leave these as is. So whatever it is here, it is here as well. There's going to be an option here for create directory for solution. I leave that checked. And I'm also, another check mark that you have up here as an option is, I have create new Git repository. You might have add to source control or something like that, right? Leave that for now unchecked because we don't need you to do that every time. We can talk about source control as we go as an ancillary technology, extra things we're going to learn outside of programming, like we did last week, to kind of connect you with GitHub. All right. For now, they'll leave it unchecked. I'm going to check mine because I want to create a repository for myself so I can sync up with the cloud, which we're going to be using, GitHub site on the cloud, so that way we can connect. If you're really gung-ho and you really want to do it, you want to follow along with me, you totally can, and you can use add a user to source control or add this project to source control if you want. But there's going to be some connection things we need to do that's outside of our scope of what we do here, which is basic programming like 101 kind of thing, right? So if you don't want to do it or if you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to. I'll press OK. Visual Studio will generate the first project stub for me. It'll look like this. This is where you should get to. If you don't, and if you pressed add source control, and it might ask you another question like, which one do you want? Team Foundation Server or Git? Obviously, you're going to choose Git, right? Because this is what we're going to be using. Okay, so I've created a local repository, but now I've got to create my GitHub repo. Remember that GitHub, the way it works is, it's almost like a place to drop your files and keep control of the versions of your code, right? Because if we start typing our code, this is the way programmers, oh, sorry? Lesson 2. Lesson 4 is what we're going to do, right? So it's GitHub. And if I go into GitHub, I'm going to create a new repository here. And my new repository, you don't have to do this if you want to watch. I'm going to go in there into GitHub and create a repository called COMP100 lesson 4, because that's the lesson we're at right now, officially. We're week 4, lesson 4, whatever you want to call it. Now, there's a couple options here when you create your repository in GitHub. And again, a repository is a storage area where you're going to keep your files, right? And it's going to be the ability for you to sync up or synchronize your files on the web, along with your local files on your computer in front of you, right? So we work within a folder or a directory inside on the computer in front of you, right? This is where we work. But occasionally what we do in our workflow, as we're working and programming, we want to keep connected with what's going on GitHub, like send our files up to GitHub. So just in case something goes wrong, your computer breaks down, or maybe you want to work with somebody else, that's a good reason to collaborate on GitHub, backup, whatever you want to do, you can do this as you go. And then on GitHub, if you make a mistake, you can always revert, go back, almost like undo a whole group of changes that you made. Now, we're not going to cover that right now. Eventually, as we go through the course, that'll be something you learn in addition to programming 101 kind of idea. Okay, so I'm going to create this repository. I'm going to use create repository. I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to grab this link from GitHub, which is a URI. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to connect with my Team Explorer. So I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to go to Changes, and I'm going to create a commit, which is a snapshot of what my files look like right now. So I'm going to make my snapshot is going to say initial commit as an example. So new VS project, right? Visual Studio C# project, let's say, and then click commit. When I do that, it creates a local commit, which means I have a local folder that now is keeping track of my changes to my code. That's all it's doing. So it's not really doing anything different. I haven't done anything right now. It's just a local folder on my system, and I'll show it to you right now. If I go to my File Explorer, and if I have a local file called GitHub, I just call it the same thing as the one online, right? And if I scroll down to lesson 4, here's COMP100 lesson 4, I double click on it, and inside there I have this folder that I'm keeping track of, and whenever you see a .git folder here, this is a special folder that GitHub uses to to kind of capture all of my changes. So it captures all the little changes that I make to my code, so I can go back, I can kind of revert back to where I was. Okay, cool. So I've got this going on, and I've made a commit. Now I've got to synchronize myself with the stuff on GitHub. I'm going to kind of Control V to put in or copy all my stuff from the stuff that's online, this little link that I get from online. I copy it here in this entry point, and I click Publish. When I do this, and if everything goes well, then when I go back online, and if I refresh, you notice that my files, the same ones that are here locally, are now on GitHub. So you guys can follow me. If something goes wrong, you don't know what I did, and you want to go back and look at what I did later on, and you will need to do that today because we're going to create a bunch of programs, one after the other, right? Then it's an opportunity for you to say, okay, how did he do it? He did this, he did this, he did this. Hey, let's download his code. Does it look like mine? Right? Because the more it looks like yours, mine like yours, then you're on track, right? Okay, so I've got my GitHub stuff. We can continue now. And there's a couple things just to remind you of what we did last week. So review, all right? We talked about the structure of a C# program. One of the things we notice is that you have all these using statements up here. Each line of code, right, we call a command statement or a code statement, right, or a statement. We could also call it a line of code. Both naming conventions are acceptable, right? So if you notice these lines of code, they have some keywords. There's some keywords here. The keywords in C# are encoded in blue, like this. See, this light blue? This is the way that my theme is color coding them. And my editor, my Visual Studio integrated development environment, this big 70 million line piece of code that we're running with right now, it's color coding them automatically for us, right? So as soon as I type something that the compiler recognizes, it color codes it so it indicates that it's a keyword. Okay, that's what it does. So again, we have a couple things too. Don't worry about what namespace means right now. Leave that the way it is. right? I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer. So Visual Studio has a bunch of different tabs like we kind of talked about last week. So again, as a review, we have the top bar here that includes some icons that you can do things with like any other Microsoft program, right? So if you're familiar with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or whatever, a lot of these same symbols are the same ones we use there, right? Now, there's some new ones too that you've never seen before. But the menu system is almost identical the way it starts. File, Edit, View. If you go to any other Microsoft program, it starts like that, File, Edit, View. So the File menu is where we do our new projects if we want to start from there, or we do Save if I want to save everything, right? The Edit menu is if I want to cut, copy, or paste code that's in here around, right? And other kind of special effects that I can do. I can also view different kinds of windows. There's different windows that minor little screens here that pop up, right? And my layout for my IDE, this is why it's called an integrated development environment, has different piece parts to it. This part, see this tab right here? Take a look. This one says program.cs at the top, and with a little X, I can actually close out of this tab. So I can go click, and now I'm out of this tab. If I want to get it back, I go over here to Solution Explorer, this little window here, and click onto it, and then it comes back. Now, but there's a little difference. This one is a preview, and you can tell because my tab is on the right-hand side, right? If I double-click it, like this, now my tab is on the left-hand side, and it's a permanent window. But I could always switch between a preview, if I want to look at multiple files, or a pinned program or part that I'm looking at. Okay, so this part is the editor, this part in here. We talked about that last time briefly, but I'll remind you again, this piece right here in the middle, this is where you do all of your coding, so to speak. On the right side, this is the Solution Explorer, and there's actually another tab down here with another window that's hidden, typically, which is the Team Explorer that I'm going to be using to connect with GitHub. You may not need to use that right now, so don't worry about it. What you really need to use is this Solution Explorer window where we're going to look at your code, all right? And this kind of gives you kind of some code that you can see. Like, for example, the one that we're looking at right now is called program.cs. The dot in the program.cs file is an indicator that this is a C# program. So the ending, right, the extension is what we call it in Windows, right? This extension, CS, is linked or connected to C# when we program. And we know as long as Visual Studio 2013 or 2012 even is installed in your system, it'll pick up the fact that program.cs is a C# program. It'll associate itself with that program and actually color code it. If I actually look at the files again on my system, so here's my system, I go to GitHub, that's just the name of my folder that I've picked. You can pick whatever name you want. I can go to lesson 4 here, and if I go into this COMP100 lesson 4 project, if I see that, if I look at CS, it seems to be, it says a CS file, and a CS file is recognizable as some kind of text file. So if I double click this, it'll bring my program file up in a text editor. So you can actually work, if you really wanted to, in a pure text editor, right, which is another program that's outside of Visual Studio. I don't recommend it though. You could, but I don't recommend it. My recommendation, because Visual Studio is an integrated development environment, is you work within the Visual Studio IDE. Yes?
How do we open that thing on the side where like you have an overview of your code, that thing?
Which one?
Yeah. The one you just got, the other side. A little bit to the left. The magnifier thing.
Which magnifier are you talking about? This side? Oh, this? Okay, yeah. So in order for me to do that, this is typically a scroll bar. This magnifier here that you're saying is a scroll bar. You right-click onto it, and you go to scroll bar options, right? And in scroll bar options, you want to choose use map mode for vertical scroll bar, and you can choose as long as you're using Visual Studio 2013, and you can choose show preview tooltip with a medium source overview, and press OK. And then you'll see the same thing I see. So you right-click on your toolbar. So if this is the toolbar, it's maybe really, really thin. You right-click onto it, and then you'll get scroll bar options. Do you get that? Yes? Can you help them out? You guys get that? Right? So that's how I did that. So it's not a magnifier, it's just a scroll bar with a map view. That's what it is. Okay, so we've got this, the C# program, and again, blue means keywords. They're a part of our command, our statements, our coding statements that we're going to use. And if you notice, mine has a bunch of these line numbers, and that's also an option you can turn on and off. And to do that, you have to go to Tools, you can go to Options, and you're going to go into Text Editor. And there's a little arrow. You're going to open the text editor up like this, and you're going to go down to C#. And then, if you notice on the right-hand side, you can click on line numbers as an option to turn on, so you can see what I'm seeing. So my line numbers are on, so this way I can indicate things like line number 3 is a using statement that says using system.link, right? Again, think about using statements as me asking C# to import additional libraries of code that are already pre-written for us that we can utilize. That's all they're there for, right? So there's stuff that's already written, we're just going to use them. And that's why it's called a using statement. In other languages, we use this, you might see it as an import statement, where we're importing pieces of code. Again, but whether it's this language or another language, the idea here is that we're using code that's already out there. It's already been created for us. Don't worry about the namespace. This is like a folder, all right? That's what it's like, or a library. Leave it the way it is, right? Our class is the container right now. All you need to know is it's a container for all of our code. And inside of our class, we have one method. Here's what the method is. And it's the main method. And inside the main method is where I want you to do all your programming for assignment number 1. Okay, so you're going to create your the body of the class. You can have more than one method, right? We haven't covered that, but you can have more than one of these, right? Remember the scope? Last week we talked about scope and code blocks, right? There's 3 code blocks here that you see. The outer code block, which is the namespace, right? And if you notice, if I just highlight it, I'm just moving my mouse. I'm not doing anything here. I'm not clicking. This highlights the code block that's the outside. Now you might not see what I see. If I go to this code block here, right? And again, I can't highlight it the same way, but if I highlight this code block by left clicking and dragging, that's all I'm doing. This code block is the program, our entire program, right? That's scope. And then this code block here between those 2 braces is the code block that's for our main method. Each code block has a scope. That's what it's called. And the scope is almost like our boundaries for where our variables, our data lives and dies. Okay? So if I declare a variable, if I define a variable that we're going to use to store data, and we're going to talk about data today, the scope is going to be anything between these braces, right? We're not going to define a variable out here today. We're going to define variables in here today. And the reason why we're going to do that is because that little scope is where we're going to live and breathe over the next week or so, okay? And this is how I want you guys to start, right? Like in here. Okay, so again, different parts of the screen. This is our editor. On the right, you're going to see the Solution Explorer. We're going to need to do that over and over again. Down here, if I click on a particular item, sometimes you'll see context-sensitive properties that might come up. For now, there's nothing because we're not clicking on some kind of user interface item, right? So right now, we're only getting context sensitivity if I click somewhere here. If I click out here, if you notice, there's some other things that come up here, and you should just ignore it because it's not important for you. This is additional information for other developers when you want to make some changes to the properties of your program, which is different than the actual program itself. For now, all we have to concentrate on is the text editor that we see in front of us. Okay, so we did that. We also talked about a couple of statements that we used last week that are very common, because remember we talked about outputting things to the console, right? So our console command is like this. Let's do it together. Capital C. A different window? Okay, I'll get to you in a second. I'll take a short break in about 5 minutes because I know people want to get some coffee and stuff like that when we start off. I think soon. Is it already closed?
No, it's not closed yet.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break. so you guys can get your coffee, because we want caffeine in our blood, right? That's how it has to be, right? A lot of it, because we're going to be here for 4 hours. We're going to get to know each other nice. So make friends with each other, because we're going to all work together, right? Okay, so here I'm typing in my first command, and it's a console command, if you remember. If you want to log in as we come in too. So I'm going to say console, and if you notice, I get some code hinting here. This is what it's called. Microsoft has dubbed it IntelliSense, right? It's code hinting. It allows us to do, or code completion. You can hear it as 3 different ways. Code completion, code hinting, IntelliSense for Microsoft. It means the same thing. It's going to make suggestions, code suggestions, to say, hey, which one do you want? I'm starting to type. I didn't type the whole word yet, and it's saying, this is what you mean. Stop. This is what you mean, right? I mean console, right? You're like my kid. I have to tell you to stop, right? Console, right? So if I just press enter when this is highlighted, it fills in the rest of the word. Okay, let me try that again. So if I go back, code hinting, I start typing, console, enter, and it kind of finishes it off for me. Code completion, code hinting, IntelliSense. It means the same thing. So console is the class that we're accessing. It's a library of information, and it's linked to this system command, the system space, namespace, if you will, right? So I could type this, console dot, and remember, when we access the methods of our classes, right? So we have a statement. We're going to use a built-in class, a built-in object that's there for us to use. It's called console, and if you use the dot or the period, you might see it as a period as a dot. It gives us additional hinting because we use the dot accessor method, dot notation is what it's called, to access other properties, other things we can do with our console command, right? So our console is the command. The dot is how we access certain things the command can do. Yes?
We don't do like system.console?
We don't have to. Well, you can, right? We'll talk about that in a second. So if I go console.writeLine, which is what we want to do, which we did last week, console.writeLine says, take whatever I put inside the method writeLine, and I can put a string literal in here with 2 quotation marks. Take a look. So here's my quotation marks. And I put in here, hello world, like we did last week, right? And remember, all statements in C#, as well as many, many, many C-influenced languages, end with a semicolon. If you don't end them with a semicolon, we get a syntax error. And there's 2 types of errors we can get, remember guys? There's a syntax error, which is like because of our grammar. When we're talking, this is almost like grammar, this semicolon, right? So it's almost, that's what we call the syntax error, something that we didn't type right, or we forgot to put something in that the program needs, the line of code needs for it to be complete, a syntax error. There's also a logic error, where it's not just the grammar we're putting in, but our thinking is wrong. It's not, we didn't put the right commands in for the computer to do what we needed to do, right? That's a logic error. 2 types of errors, generally. Okay, so this console.writeLine is something we're going to be doing, and it'll send, when we say, if I put this hello world statement in here together, it'll take this string literal, hello world, which is a group of characters strung together between these 2 quotation marks, right? Hello world. It's almost like we're speaking to the console. If you ever read a book and you see quotation marks, you know that someone's talking, right? Well, this is us talking to the console. We're sending this hello world statement out to the console. Now, if you don't know what the console is, this is a console application. We're going to figure that out. If I click this button up here, remember this is part of our Visual Studio IDE, this integrated development environment. We have this start button. It's actually allowing us to start debugging. It'll compile the code. There's different kinds of things that our code does. First, our Visual Studio environment checks, like right now what it's doing. It's already checked our code to see if there's any errors. So far, it's not showing any errors. So we're ready to compile and build. The compiler, which is actually a piece part of our Visual Studio environment that's in the background, you don't have to worry about it right now, right? It's going to run and try and build our code into machine language. We talked about convert this line of English and some grammar that we put together here that makes sense to the compiler, convert it to machine language, and run it so that it does something for us. Okay, that's what it's going to do. So if I click this on, it's going to go flash, and then it's going to go. It's going to go away. Why? Let me try that again. Take a look. for those of you who remember. Flash, and there was the terminal window that came up, right? That's our console that comes up. We did something to it, and then it went away. It goes away because we've asked the console to say hello world, and then it's done its job, so it closes down. There's nothing for the console to do after it's opened and done its job. It's not going to stay open because unless I tell it to. And let's tell it to. Remember what we did last week. We told it to stay open by doing a console.read key, right? Console.read key actually reads a key, any key, from the console. And we're also going to put another console command, console.writeLine again, and we're going to say something like press any key. This is a message we're going to send to the console, any key to exit, right? That's what we're going to put there. So we're going to say press any key to exit with a semicolon. If you notice, if I didn't put the semicolon, that's part of our grammar or syntax. It says, hey, this is what's expected, a semicolon. That's our code hinting telling us that. This little red squiggly is a hint for us to say, put in a goddamn semicolon or else we're not going to run your code. Right? So I'm going to do it. I'm going to save, Control S. You can also hit these buttons up here. This saves the program. This saves everything inside the project. Either way is good. And when I do save, you see this green line that comes up. This green line here tells us that these are all the changes we've made to our code. Okay, this is fine and good. We've done our read key. Let's start this off and see what happens. So I click the play button and I say hello world and press any key to exit. Now this is pretty small, and if I want to modify the way this window here looks, I'm going to right click onto it, go to properties, right? Because I don't want it to be black. I want to change it so you guys can see it better. I'm going to go to colors. I'm going to choose screen background and choose white. And then for my screen text, I'm going to go black. And for my font, I'm going to go probably 16 and press OK. That's a little better. So now you can see my output. My output says hello world, press any key to exit. Okay, this is fine and good, but I don't like the fact that hello world and press any key to exit are next to each other. Wait a minute, I didn't put it like that inside my code. How come it's appearing like that here? Can anyone answer? How come this is appearing like this here? Huh?
You put a space.
I did. Look, here's a space. I got a space
but
between.
you didn't put an actual space, like a code for
So let's review what it does. So remember that C# ignores spaces, white space like this, in our code. It doesn't look at that as a space. In order for us to put a space when we print out or when we send a message to the console, we need to put an additional console.writeLine command in here with nothing in it. That's almost like it sends a space, a line space, to the console. Now if I run it again, save and run, now the console shows that there's a bit of a space here. Okay, that's cool, but I don't like that either. I want to put some kind of divider. How do I put a little divider in front of it? I'm going to kind of draw it out, right? Because it's just a bunch of characters. I go right line, right? And I'm going to put an open quotations and then put some pluses because I like that. There we go. A little divider with a semicolon at the end, right? And now we see what we can actually start to see what it's going to look like for output, right? If I press play, then all of a sudden we get this, right? So again, it's just text that I'm sending to the console. So when I talk console today, and especially on your assignment number 1, which we're going to review before the end of the day, console means this window that's going to pop up, and you need to control it. And the way we're going to control it is by using, even though I'm not going to say it in your assignment or your little lab today, the read key, you need to use this console.writeLine and console.read key, these two commands here, right, to say, hey, press any key to continue, right, or press any key to exit. So we talked about the console last week. We talked about this is our first command. This is our first program, console.writeLine hello world. Okay, so I've done some changes, and this is my workflow. Now I'm talking about something else. I've done my program, and I'm a developer. I'm going to continue with my workflow. I'm going to go to my Team Explorer window. You don't have to do this, but you can watch. Team Explorer window, I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes, and inside my changes, I notice that this is the only file that's changed, and I'm going to make a commit. So I, added console commands to create hello world message, right? That's what I did. Press commit, and from here I'm going to go back to unsync commits and sync. When I do that, and I go back out to GitHub and refresh, and I go into this COMP100 Lesson 4 project, I see that I've got my program.cs, and inside of here, if you want to ever follow along with me, you can see that I've got the same code here, which was just updated a few seconds ago, that I do locally on my system. So this way, worst case scenario, like I said last week, is you can always go on my GitHub, github.com/my last name, which is Tiliopoulos. Go there, find me on GitHub, and in there you can find your lesson plan. So COMP100, this week is lesson 4, and you can go in there and see what we're doing. And I might partition, and I might create another repo later on today where I say lesson 4 part 2, lesson 4 part 3, lesson 4 part 3, or 4 or 5, whatever. I can make as many repos as I want, luckily. Okay, so cool. We've done this piece. And now, before Tim Hortons closes, we're going to take a break, right? So we get some coffee, and we'll continue after we come back.